In the pages of Southern Bastards, writer Jason Aaron and artist Jason Latour have brought to life a bleak and soul-stained vision of the American South. Craw County, Alabama is a uniquely tortured place. A place where organized crime, godfathered by the high school football coach, has taken over the town and constructed a deep-fried Stepford facade. Callous-handed folk walk down a main street belted by barbecue joints and hardware stores. Everyone spits Southern localisms, flies the stars in bars, and talks about who they saw at church this week. But everyone is afraid of Coach Boss. They hide in their normalcy, fearing to break rank. The first arc of Southern Bastards showed the readers that this fear was a ratified one. Earl Tubbs tried to take Craw County back from Coach Boss. His nobility was rewarded when Coach Boss beat him to death in the street, while the whole town watched and digested the message that was being fed to them. Since this event, Southern Bastards has remained a largely formless series. It has refused to maintain any strong narrative fulcrum, instead deciding to deliver small vignettes that flesh out the backstories of characters introduced during the events of the first story arc. These stories only share the most basic narrative connection. They all take place in Craw County, and they all either orbit the rise of Coach Boss or the death of Earl Tubbs. While this has given the otherwise superb series a lack of plot agency, it has communicated one thing very clearly to its reader. Craw County is a haven for hopelessness. Its residents are broken people. They are selfish, rotten, morally malignant humans operating with only the dimmest justification for their choices. They are often left bankrupt when trying to canonize their own actions, and they are relatively nonchalant about the foulness of their own humanity. That is what makes issue 11 of this series initially so interesting. It starts off feeling like an inversion of this pattern. Rather than telling the story of a rotten resident of Craw County trying and failing to add poetic weight to their own corruption, this issue follows a character who is hyper-aware of the town's ethical shortfallings. The focus of this issue is a new character only ever called by his last name, Boone. Boone lives on the outskirts of Craw County. He hates the town, he hates football, he hunts, farms, and lives in a shack that was built by his grandfather. Cross prays over the carcass of every deer he kills, and serves as a deacon at his church. He appears to be everything previous characters were not. A principled man with a functional moral compass. A man with empathy and perspective. For the first time since Earl Tubb, the reader is given something of a hero. But, after all, this is Southern Bastards, and even the heroes need to carry a hard-boiled sense of reckoning. It turns out Boone is pretty much a redneck version of the Punisher. He believes he is on a mission from God to cleanse Craw County. The reader follows in his ritual. They see his kill, and they see his cover-up, but they also see how he processes what he has done. Boone is not delusional or insane. He does not hear the voice of God telling him to kill. He does not believe he is divine or even righteous. He is aware of the awfulness of his actions and that they run in protest to the teachings of his religion. In the book's closing scene, Boone goes to church. In his church, the congregation practices snake handling. It's a real-world form of worship where people place their hands in boxes of venomous snakes to show that God will protect them from harm. As Boone reflects on what he has done, he baptizes himself in snakes. He is looking for proof that God approves of what he is doing. He believes that if the snakes spare him, that God approves of his violent version of justice. He is left unharmed. This issue really does feel like an audit of itself. By focusing on a character that initially seems pious, the book highlights its lack of a moral skeleton. By berating us with horror, violence, and sociopathic main characters, this series has conditioned us to expect evil and made us thirsty for any spot of light in the dark. Then, we finally get it. We finally have a surrogate for our sense of right. Then, we see that our avatar for good is a murderer. We see him go into a house of God and pick up a serpent. Boone's internal narration repeats the point that the serpent is often portrayed as a familiar of, or a representation of, the literal devil. So when we see Boone cover himself in snakes, what we really see is the book's only bit of goodness literally bathe himself in the devil. Southern Bastards fooled us with a brilliant act of thematic misdirection. It spent multiple issues convincing us that its story was a landscape of austere characters participating in repeated acts of violence against their fellow man, only to show us that there was still a divine core to things, a lone man that embodied the decent aspects of humanity. Then it showed us that even the noble aspects of moral bureaucracy in Craw County must be filed and approved by Satan. While it is relentless in its bleakness, Southern Bastards has done so out of a dedication to its own world building. What has been constructed here is a tonally consistent and thematically complex modern western. Craw County has turned into a frighteningly convincing place, where Satan lives in the house of God, and murder is the closest thing to heroism you can find. I mean, from the outside, it looks to be mostly based around misogyny, the sweater vests, and crossing over with things that used to be things, a cast that